Welcome to today's podcast. It's called The Winning Pitch, and it's designed to give you an example of listening to someone else's story and finding pieces in it to stimulate your life so that everything goes better for you. Today's guest is a personal friend of mine. His name is Steve Spray, and Steve will introduce himself to you and tell you his story. So the stage is yours, brother.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tom. Appreciate you having me on, man. And so I am Steve Spray, and I work for a guy that probably a lot of people know, and I know it's somebody that you follow very closely. And so I work with a guy named Grant Cardone, and so what do you me dive into how I got to come work with Grant, the hard knocks before or when I got there?
You can start this in the womb if you want, or you can start it in junior high school. Let's tell your story and go to what you think is the beginning.
Yeah. Well, I think the beginning, starts off with where I grew up. I grew up on a farm, Indianapolis, Indiana. So if you guys know where that's at, there's not a lot of people talking a lot about success there. There's a really set mindset. There's a set way of living, that we grew up like, my dad was, he had a job and then he would come home and then he would work on the farm. And, so from an early age, I was out there working with him, so when I would come home from school and he would come home from work, that's the time I went and spent with my dad where, I would go work. We'd be, changing tires on cars and tractors or changing oil, working on machines and things like that. And which that was cool. For me back then, so I'm a kid and, I'm working with my dad and, we're getting dirty and having a good time. So I think early on, I built a lot of, skills in just work ethic, and I think I learned that the most from my dad, which probably was the one thing that I carried into the business world. I think that helped me out the most. And, so fast forward through there, I went through school and, I took part in a few college courses at the local community college. I learned real quick that wasn't for me. And, and the way, which was cool though, because I was told I was really the first person to go to college in my family. So, that's what I was being told. They were like, hey, you need to go to college. But then when I went to go ask for help to pay for college, my parents were like, well, no, you got to pay for that. So here I am, broke, no money. And, I was just coming out of high school and I had to go learn how to write checks every semester. And so I worked and went to school at the same time. I mean, I did that off and on for a couple of years and learned a lot. What was funny is I didn't actually think that I finished, but my mom did call me one day when I was like 24, 25. And she goes, you didn't tell me you graduated. I graduated from what? And she says, I'm holding an associate's degree for your college graduation. I'm like, well, I didn't know that. So I guess I did.
Yeah, it wasn't very important to you, though. I know. I'm thinking of what you said about your dad telling you got to pay for it. I used to tell my daughter when she was talking about going to school, in high school, I says, remember one thing. You can go to any school that you can afford. I'm not paying for it.
Yeah.
And she chose to borrow a lot of money and go to a 4-year college and come out of school with, I don't know what it's going to amount to, $100,000 to $200,000 worth of debt. Makes no sense with me because she used to work for me in summertime and in between calling in sick to school, and I'd get her on the phones and have her making outbound phone calls to me. And I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. So she went to school to become a physical therapist and got partway into it, as most kids do, and decided this isn't for me. And you want to know what she does now? She works for ADP as a salesman, cold calling people. It's hilarious.
That's awesome. Well, hopefully she learned a lot at school. I think you learned a lot of disciplines and stuff at school. I probably, that's probably the one thing that I learned at school was to, because I had to work and do my schoolwork. And then when I was paying for it, I think it meant a lot more to me. So I think I probably built some discipline in there, but man, that's hilarious. But I think sales is I learned more doing sales than I did in school, regarding business. I had more of those conversations with business owners, with people on the mechanics of how their business is working. Like I learned more just in the action of things as a salesperson.
Well, Elon Musk was recently made a post about you can learn everything that you need to know for free, as opposed to going to school and paying for it and being taught useless stuff and, you know,
Mm-hmm.
unapplicable processes. And, you know, it's just, you know, I'm fortunate enough that I know Elon, but,
Yeah. Keep
you
you
know,
hanging out this weekend?
it's school to me was, I don't know that it was a heck of a lot different for me in high school or college, but what I learned was how to get away with stuff, how to chase girls, including teachers that were female, and other things that were not very profitable for me as I got a little bit older in life. So anyway,
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead and finish this. Keep telling your story. The people are here because they want to listen to you.
Yeah. No, I think, I think a lot of people go through that, myself included in school. But when I was in college, actually, I was in construction. That was really more along the lines of the people that I was around, the lifestyle I grew up, like my aunts and uncles and everybody. I mean, they're all construction, or they're like, really that, blue collar worker job. And so that's what I did. And after a while, I remember when I was 19 or 20 years old. I was still going to school actually on this, but I remember coming home from, I would go back and forth from being an electrician, wiring houses, to being a landscaper. And because I work with these two people where, when one didn't have the job, I'd just go work with the other guy. And so we were on and off, and they both actually knew each other, right? And so I remember coming home one day from the landscaping job, and I'd been carrying like bricks all day, and I'm like 19, and I had to like lay down, and I'm just like having these crazy back pains. And I remember just laying there thinking to myself, what am I doing? Like I'm 19 years old. Like I know for sure that I should not be feeling the way that I was. But I was like, dude, I can't do this much longer. Like I'm wrecked right now. And I'd been working at this job for a couple of years. But that was the point where I had it. And so I went out, and I started going business to just ask like, hey, do you guys have work, jobs, anything? And I found a boat dealership where I walked in, and I was like, man, it looks cool to work here. And I actually walked into the boat dealership, and I walked in, and of course somebody greeted me. It was the sales manager. And I said, hey, are you guys hiring for any jobs around here? Like I didn't know how to professionally get a job at that point. So I'm just stumbling in to say, hey, do you guys have anything? And, I'm dressed nice. I've always been like a good looking dressed guy. Like this has kind of always been my style. And so this guy really was like, well, you ever been in sales? And I was like, nope. And he was like, okay, well, yeah, hey, come back on Friday. We'll see if we can't get you an interview here. And I was like, all right. So I didn't think anything of it. I think I'm coming back because maybe they got some job for me. I would have taken anything, by the way, cleaning boats. That's what I actually thought. I thought it'd be like, I bet they have jobs in the back, And so then I come back on Friday, and the guy's like, hey, so I want you to be a salesperson, And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah. He's like, you can do it. He's like, I'll teach you everything. And that was how I got my first sales job, So I really stumbled into it. And then come to find out, actually, it was funny because he told me like a week later, he's like, because he asked me to go hang out with him after work. And he was like, hey, let's go get a drink after work. And at this point, I was kind of like out of that scene. And I was like, nah, man, I'm good. He's like, what? He's like, man, honestly, I hired you because I thought you looked fun to party with. So that's how my sales career.
I've always heard that about you, Steve.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Now I'm fun. I'm out of that scene. So I wasn't doing that, but I worked there for a couple of years and, struggled in sales. And then I moved from that to selling cars. I was selling real estate. I was going different places. I'll tell you, I had trouble in all of these areas. I had trouble, I made the best money selling boats, but then I went to selling cars. I did okay there after I got a little bit of training, but I'd sold real estate. I sold insurance. I worked at T-Mobile for a little while, selling phones. And I always had a problem being successful and doing well. And somebody finally said, I actually heard this one day from Grant Cardone. He goes, you know what you are? You're the common ingredient in all those recipes right there. And I just started to think to myself, I'm like, dude, that's right. Like I am the one in all these. I'm like, what? So I really had to get myself together. And so I started to study Grant Cardone, which is what, kind of led me into the next phase of my life.
So the first time I remember seeing you is you were on a television show. I think it was called Whatever It Takes, where you did the live interview.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, this is so so I studied Grant for when Grant came to town. Actually, I had a sales manager who said, "Hey, you need to go see this guy. You need to go watch him."
Were you selling cars at that point?
Yes, I was selling cars, and I wasn't doing good at that time, but he just liked me. I was just a likable guy. Like most people, and just got along with people. And he was like, "Hey man, I want you to go to this thing. I'm actually going to pay for it, for your ticket to go." And he made all the other sales guys pay, but I was a little bit newer, so he kind of had my back on it. And I remembered, if he wouldn't have bought that ticket for me, I wouldn't have went, because I remember the only reason I did go was because he bought it. And I remember talking to one of the salespeople there. I'm like, dude, why do they want us to go to this event? I mean, I can't take off a day. I'm already trying to figure out how to get out of this thing, because I'm like, dude, I can't, they want me to take off a full day. I got to drive up there. I got to sit in, I got to listen to some guy talk about sales. I'm out here selling. I'm like, and I just had no idea. I go to this event and I show up, and there's probably 200 people, maybe 300 in the room. Grant Cardone's the speaker. It's the first time I'd ever met him. Really, I didn't know anything about him until the second.
Okay.
And this guy just lights up the room. I mean, this guy's going, the things that he was saying. I mean, I'm just sitting here and I'm just staring at him like crazy. I'm like, man, dude, everything this guy's saying is true, but it also goes against almost everything I've ever heard before. But I believe this guy. Like, I actually believe this guy's right about everything he's saying. He was talking about don't be broke. He was talking about the amount of calls you need to make per day, like the massive action. Like, I agree with all these things. And I started to think, like, dude, this guy actually has it down. Like, this guy's right. And I guarantee I took more away out of that event that day than anybody in that entire room. And from that day forward, I went back, I started reading his books, I started watching his videos, I started training. Within 45 days of training, because we kind of caught that mid-month, by the end of the next month, I had more than doubled my sales. So I went from selling like 8 cars a month to I sold 16 cars that month. The following month after that, I sold 24 cars. I hit all my bonuses. I made a check for like 16 grand. And that was a game changer for me, because that showed me that it was all up to me. I was at cause over every single problem or opportunity or success that was there. And, I really turned it around at that point.
So how did you wind up on that show?
So from there, man, I followed Grant for like 2 years, watching him on YouTube. I was like one of the first guys to watch him on YouTube and to follow him. I mean, this is before he didn't even have a Facebook page at this time.
Okay.
Today, he's got 6 million followers, or more than that, actually. There's millions of followers on there. He didn't have a
Just
Twitter
make
account.
up a number. I'd make it 100 million.
Yeah, he's probably got, yeah, that's right. It's up there. That's how he does it sometimes. But I was following him, on YouTube. And so this is where he kept talking about, he's like, hey, I'm moving my offices from LA and moving to Miami, and I'm going to be doing a little hiring interview. It's going to be like a show. And I never thought anything of it. But after I've seen 2 or 3 videos of this, so just mind you, the frequency that he does, because I saw him talk about it. And I thought, I'm like, oh, that's going to be cool. I was waiting for the show to come out, because I was too small-minded at that time to think, dude, why don't I get on that show? And I ended up having I remember having one of the worst days ever. I think everything was going wrong at this time in my life. Everything was going wrong. And there's probably some out ethics issues on my side for sure. But, I wasn't really looking at that. I was paying attention to, man, I got a bad job. I can't afford my rent. I got no money. The girl I want to be with probably didn't want to be with me. I knew that. And so I'm like, everything's crumbling down. And I was like, dude, I'm going to send a video into this guy. And because that's what you had to do. You had to send a 60-second video in to be on the show. And so I didn't even have a suit. I
remember the suit that you wore was 2 sizes too big for you, is the way I remember it.
It was two sizes too big because it wasn't mine. It was a tuxedo jacket that somebody had. I think it was my roommate that had it. And here I am, and I ended up taking that, by the way. So I had that same thing, and I put that on, but I actually knew all of his material. So I had all of his books. I had his CDs at the time, and I do the video, and I basically am like, hey, here's all the books. I've read this book, this book, this book. This is what I like. This is what I got going on, and so I was just diving into everything, and I hit it. I guess my pitch was good. And I got a phone call a couple days later. I was like, hey, so it sounds like you want to come down here and be on the show. And so I came down. I was one of the first episodes because they had to spread out that whole season. And I come down and I show up, and you know, there's long stories about being in Miami. The first part, from moving from Indiana to Miami, different culture shock. Two totally different places, by the way. I mean, it's just totally crazy, right? So I was looking for a place to stay, but the difference is the amount of money in rent. So I was splitting a room, paying the guy $400 a month, and living in Indiana. In the ghetto in Miami, it's $1,500. So like, if you want to, I mean, gunshots at night. Worst place in Miami is $1,500 for like a 1-bedroom. So I'm trying to figure out, how do I even do this? So I start calling around on, somebody said, hey, look for rooms on Craigslist. I'm like, all right, whatever. It doesn't sound safe, but you know, I was like, hey, I'm going down for this thing anyway. And I was like, that's a better alternative than going to my car. You know, worst case scenario, I ended up rooming with somebody. And so I start calling around on people on Craigslist, and they all speak Spanish. And so I can't even talk to them. I'm like, what am I going to do? And I ended up talking to this one lady. She was very nice, very sweet. Like, she was this Colombian lady, and I called about her room in her house, and she was like, yeah, you know, and I was telling her about my job, and she was very nice. She's like, yeah, this is great, blah, blah, blah. And so, and I told her where my office was, and she was like, you know, I live kind of far from there. She's like, but I do have, I will let you rent a cot. I own a used furniture store on South Beach. I'm going to let you rent for $500 if you want to stay there for like a month or two. And I was like, what? So she was going to let me rent a cot, and she gave me a dresser to sleep in the back of this furniture store. And I was like, okay, is there a shower and everything there? And she's like, yeah. I was like, send me a picture of it, you know, because I'm like thinking, hey, this is going to be, you know, this might just be too crazy. And so she sends me a picture of the shower. The shower's clean and everything. So I'm like, done, deal. And so I come down here and I actually lived in the back of this furniture store on a cot. And, you know, like, illegally, you can't live in a strip center, you know, retail real estate where you've got a furniture store there, which was awesome, by the way, because at nighttime I could pick any couch that I wanted to just to hang out on. And
you didn't sleep on your cot, did you? You slept in the lazy boys.
Yeah,
At least it was a recliner.
Yeah, no, I did actually. I stayed in there because I was always worried because there was like glass windows, and so you could always see in there. And I was always like kind of worried. I'm like, dude, if somebody breaks in here, but like in the room where I was, it was kind of hidden and in the back, and I was new to this city, right? So I'm like, I don't really know what to expect. So I'm kind of following the rules, and so it was cool. But I did that. I ended up staying there for 8 months actually. So, you know, I had to do the show. I came down. I ended up winning the show. The show was crazy. If you guys haven't seen it, go to Grant Cardone, Whatever It Takes, on YouTube. You guys will be able to see it. And I ended up winning that show, getting a job.
It wasn't the first one, right?
It actually was, but I think on YouTube it's not labeled under a number, and then if you see it on our Grant Cardone TV, I think it's labeled under episode number 5.
Okay.
Yeah, or episode number 4 or 5, one of those. And so I remember it was on the back half, but it was cool, you know. So I got to see that, and I won. And then they were just kind of like, okay, well, are you starting? And I'm like, I ain't got a choice. Like, I kind of came down here, actually, you know, really thinking that I was going to get this job. So I didn't know what to expect on the show anyway. You know, I didn't really know how serious it was. There wasn't a bunch of promotion on it. You know, there was just Grant on his YouTube talking about doing an interview. And I'm like,
So what was going through your mind? You're going down, you're going to do this show, and
Hmm.
you're not certain that you're going to get a job out of it, correct?
I wasn't, but I also kind of was a little bit because I didn't know how intense the show was going to be. It was way more intense when I got there than what I actually thought because I just imagine you got this guy, he's like talking about hiring people. There was never a show on this thing, right? So he's like, hey, we're going to film it. We're going to, we're going to be doing all this and that. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, yeah, that sounds cool. Like my thought was just to come down and like get a job with them. Like I didn't necessarily know that it was going to come down to me standing in ice on the side of the streets in Miami selling fish to people walking by and having to like do all the crazy things I did on that show. But yeah, I mean, I kind of,
What was the funny, I'm sure that our listeners will like this. What was the funniest thing, most unexpected thing that happened to you during the filming of that show?
there was a guy that I competed against who didn't have any legs. And so this
I
guy,
vaguely remember that, yeah.
yeah, so he didn't have any legs. Me and this guy like bonded though. He was really cool, but he didn't have any legs and he had prosthetics that he could pull on and off. And so we were actually given a task where everybody had to carry all this carpet out of the office and down 6 flights of stairs to a dumpster.
I
And
remember
so
that part.
yeah, so I'm probably like the most athletic guy in the whole thing. I mean, there was different guys and there was women there and there was this guy with the no legs thing, right? And so, but he was like totally going to be a part of it. And he was like, me and him were kind of leading the pack. Like it was awesome. And at one point we were outside dragging all this carpet. Like if you know carpet, there's a big pad underneath.
Mm-hmm.
That stuff is heavy. So imagine a big rolled up thing. And I'm carrying this across the streets. There's cars coming and and we're like timing. And we got Grant in the back, like just yelling. He's like, hurry up. You're gonna, you know how Grant is. And so he's just like, yelling, telling us to hurry. This guy, the one with the prosthetic legs, stops in the middle of the street, pulls off both of his prosthetic legs. So he's got like 90, it's above, they were cut off above the knee.
Wow.
This guy is carrying carpet, not a ton of it, but it was enough where it was like, dude, that was very, very, like, even that was like just impressive because like the others couldn't. He's carrying it running across the street with no legs. He's like, but he could like maneuver his like upper part of the leg. He could like run on that part. Like it was crazy. Like, I mean, he said he had lived like that his entire life. So he was kind of well versed in it, but dude, it was super inspiring. So it was really one of the strangest parts of the whole thing because you don't really see that every day. Somebody just pull off their leg and then start like actually producing more, by the way. Like this guy was even more, he was operating better without him. So that was really probably one of the craziest things that I've seen on that show. And also one of the most inspiring. So that was awesome.
Do you stay in communication with him?
No, I haven't talked to that guy. I had one, this has been 8 years since we had that show. And I had one person reach out to me since then, but I never ended up getting like their numbers or anything. And social media wasn't that big back then. It was
okay.
just coming open.
Awesome. So you go through it, they announce you as the winner, then what happens?
Well, this is where the hardest part happens. So now I actually get to work for Grant Cardone. This is where I didn't really have the type of skills that I needed to perform at the job because I was an inside salesperson. I really had never had that type of position before, so it was new. I was also selling to business owners, and where before most of my job was more of a retail situation where I'm actually selling to consumers and people, and like I'm like trying to sell Mrs. Jones and Mr. Jones a boat versus or like a Honda Accord versus now I'm selling a training product to general managers of car dealerships. These people are brutal, by the way. I mean, these are like 20-year like veterans in business who've like been negotiating with vendors
Grinders.
for years. They're
Grinders,
hardest grinders in the world. I remember one day Grant walked in and he said, forget about how hard this is. He said, forget about how much money you're going to make here. If you learn this one skill, you can go anywhere in the world. And I believe that, I think back then it was very hard. I was just like, yeah, because I would believe anything he would say at that point, where he was like really my idol and like the guy that I really paid attention to. And I'm like, okay. And so I did believe that, but I was also like, I'm like, this is kind of brutal. And but no, today I definitely agree with that. It's very true. And so the first year working there, I'm building up. I got these longer sales cycles. I got no money. I'm living in South Beach in this furniture store. I've got, all the problems that everybody in that position has, even before that. Me living mediocre and living that average lifestyle of just getting by. I was making $30,000 or $40,000 a year before that. That put me into a position to get bad debt on cars. I had credit card, bad debt there. And that stuff just drowns you. And so I'm moving into this better environment, but I was still pulling along those same problems that were still drowning me, by the way. So the first year, as I'm like trying to build up and like get some income going there, I still had these same problems. I ended up having to sell my car because I couldn't afford it. And I had to ride the bus to work every single day. So I don't know. I know you've been to Miami a lot. I don't know about your listeners. If you ever been to Miami, it's hot every single day. The humidity down here is pretty wild. So when you have to wear, suit and tie every day and you're walking 8 blocks to the bus every single day, you're already sweating through all of your clothes by the time you get there. And then you got to ride the bus where it's not the nicest bus in the world. I mean, there's some pretty scary people on there, by the way. It's a little, there's some, there's like some bums out there. It's like, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it's enough to be like, dang, man, like, dude, I need to get my stuff together, which gave me some motivation, because having to do that every single day with no car. I mean, you couldn't even call my living place a real place. I was living in a furniture store. Like, if you stop and think about, I mean, I got all the people back at home who already told me like, hey, don't move down there. Like, you're going to move back. I got all those people now going, hey, dude, when are you going to call it quits? Like, because it's even worse now than it seemed when I come down. And,
so I'm going to ask you some hard questions.
Yeah.
How much, what was your gross income the first year you worked at Cardone?
$36,000.
What did you make in 2019?
2019, that was last year, 746.
Say that slowly for our listeners. Spell it out.
$746,000. So
and how,
yeah, I mean,
in 7 years?
That was, in less than 7. Yeah, 7 years. Yeah.
I'd call that a success story, don't you?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So from there, I had a really hard year. That first year coming in, I made 36,000. But through Grant's training and through Cardone University and just really being close to him to watch, like, he never really coached me because there was so much information available. It was just watching like how he moved. Plus I'm like the brand new guy who like isn't really producing right. He's still, he's kind of running and gunning.
Yeah, in fact, I remember him making the comment that he was kind of telling people that they should get rid of you.
Yeah, he did. No, he actually told Jared, which was my boss at the time. Well, he's still my boss, but he told Jared on 3 different occasions, hey, get rid of that guy. He's not producing. We got it. He wanted somebody who could come in that like came in with a book of business and could be ramped up quick. And he kept saying, hey, get rid of that guy. Which it didn't feel good, because Jared at some point had to tell me, he's like, hey, dude, Grant doesn't, like, I'm the only guy hanging on. You need to produce something, because Grant wants to fire you. Like, he doesn't want you to be here. He already told me to get rid of you, right? So like, imagine me hearing that. So I got the guy that I idolized, that I busted my ass for, to come down. I'm living in crazy, like, unbelievable. It couldn't even be worse. Like, I mean, it was terrible.
Oh yes, it could.
Yeah, it could. But in my mind, I was thinking, I'm like, man, this is terrible, right? So, and I've got this guy now who I'm trying to work for and like do well, who's like, hey, get this guy out of here. So I wasn't really feeling too good, but I'll tell you what, that gave me so much fuel. and so much fire because I kind of turned on him a little bit where I was like, it became this thing where I was like, dude, I'm going to show this guy. And I really did feel that way. Actually, it wasn't even just him. There was they hired another salesperson that came in at that time. And then there was one other salesperson that came in who had already been working with Grant on the road for a couple years. And
Is that Heath?
And Heath
Okay.
was doing well. So I've got all this, like, you know, I'm kind of like, I'm ready to explode. And then I got this guy who comes in who does well. And then he's like getting all the accolades from Grant. Him and Grant are like, you know, fist bumping and having fun. And I'm just like, I got some, like, you know, committed to, dude, I'm going to prove them that I can do this. And I like buckled down, man. I went really hard. And that was when it was almost like the gear shifted.
What did you actually change? I know I understand
the decision. Yeah, I made the decision. Okay. There's a phenomenon that happens when you actually make a decision. Like, so many people say, like, yeah, no, I've made the decision. No, you haven't. You've not made the decision. You have not made the decision, because if you made the decision, you literally everything in your life would change. I was working day in, day out. I was working Saturdays. I was working Sundays. I was making more calls than anybody. I was getting more talk time. I was getting hung up more than anybody. I mean, I was getting the worst. I was the worst. And I was studying more. I was spending more time. I was walking around. I had ear pods in all the time, headphones. I remember I used to have, they weren't even the headphones. I had those beat things that I would put in. I would listen to Grant all the time, the books, the audios. And I'm just like taking this in. And I had made the decision that I was going to make it. And that's when, you know, I really understood his material and was able to really use it. And, you know, changed my life at that point, you know, because then I started to win and really win in a much bigger way. You know, I ended up, I got kicked out of the furniture store because one of the tenants ended up calling, they were mad. They were having a few, you know, tenants up. Mm-hmm. And I was just caught in the crosshairs, which I was doing something illegal. But he was trying to get her out and blah, 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 whatever. So ended up, I got kicked out one day. And I had to go live I lived in a studio, which actually I felt like was worse. It was 3 times the rent, but it was worse. I mean, this place was bug infested. So my situation got worse, actually. And
I've lived in apartments where when I would come into my apartment at night after work and turn the light on, that was the cockroaches moving off the counters. I've been there, so I know.
Yeah. That's what it was. That's what it was, man. I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I don't know what they were. They were like these, I felt like they were, because this place was made of wood, and they were termites, but they had wings, so they would fly. And when I would wake up, and they would only come out in the middle of the night, and I would come out, and it would look like one of those movies where like crazy bugs were everywhere, like millions, it seemed like. And like, honestly, I would have to like get bug killer and things like that. And then sometimes I'd wake up in the morning, there'd be like wings all over the floor. And I'm like, I mean, the bugs were coming out at night. I mean, this was not good. So,
you know how I got rid of my termites?
How's that?
I admired them. I just treated them like friends. And to this day, I admire the hell out of termites. When you realize how long those little creatures have been on this planet and what they've been through, and they're still surviving, you got to admire them. They're just ballsy as hell, and they can live off anything. So
no, you got to be.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just had to bring that point up for you.
No, that's funny, because like it's kind of the same thing for me. Like I just kind of, I was like, I wasn't letting it bother me. I think some people would have been like, hey, you know what? Like, I'm gonna quit. But I had this thing where I wasn't letting little things like that stop me from getting where I was going. Like at this point, I was so locked in, but it wasn't still for like another couple months. I think people think that when you lock in, or when you like really make the decision, or like when you're really going for it, that it's supposed to happen quick. Like, no, this was a really long time, actually. This was months of just getting beat. Like the hardest part about getting through times like this, like even in the times that we're in right now, it's like, and it's like the day, like during the day when you're there and you're like in the mix and you're making the calls and like nothing makes sense, that's the worst part. That's when it feels like, dude, this is never going to end. This is where you give up. This is where you quit. This is where you try to go do something different. This is where you're like, this isn't for me, versus like hanging in there. Like if you could have just hung in there and had that same day, but had that for like 2 more months, you would break out on the other side into crazy success, which is really what happened for me. I mean, that's like, I just was willing to say, dude, I'm just going to do this until somebody says, hey, dude, you really do have to get out of here. And that's when I really started.
Grant would tell you, don't go.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's funny because like that next year I really popped up and really started doing really well. And somebody asked him a question about, hey, what do you do with people, that are taking a long time to be successful? And, and he really commented on it at that time. He's like, we had a guy like that. And I wanted to get rid of him. And he even said, he's like, I wanted to get rid of him, but really I was wrong. Like, this guy's a superstar for our company now. He just took longer. And I think now just being in my position now where I've helped others develop in our company and all that I've been through over the past 8 years, I really think you got to look at like what people did before, like what had molded them to get there, because I think people get good quicker because of things that they did beforehand. Like when we go back to me growing up on the farm, dude, I had that work ethic where it was like, hey, you just work until you get the job done. Oh. And like that was what saved my life,
Awesome. So your dad was pretty valuable.
Oh, I tell him all the time, I'm very thankful for my dad. I tell him, and he doesn't know it, so like today, fast forward to today where we're at, my net worth's over $1 million. I'm younger, I'm 34 years old now. And like, I've lived in super nice places for the past couple of years. And like, they see me in this like life and like, but I tell my dad all the time, I'm like, hey man, you're the reason I'm here.
Are they still, are your parents still asking you to come home and give up on Miami now?
No, it's because they love to come down and vacation now. So
now I get it. Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question about, I'm really curious, and this is for me and not necessarily for the audience.
Yeah.
What was it like being around Grant? You come from, you're living in a furniture store, you're scared to death at night, you show up at work, and I would think that his management style would scare the shit out of you.
Yeah.
Or overwhelm you.
Yeah, we were a smaller company then too. When I started, there was less than 10 people. So,
in total.
Yeah, in total. Yeah, today there's like 140 right now, just in our office. Okay. Then there's probably a couple hundred. But this is where, I wasn't dealing with him one-on-one because he was still running most of his businesses and he had managers. So like Jared was my manager. So Jared was a brand new manager at that time because Jared had just moved up from salesperson to manager. So he was grooming Jared to really have this style. So I got kind of lucky where like I'm coming up where I'm figuring it out. Jared was amazing, by the way. Like this guy already had been doing well with Grant. Like Jared was already like totally good. Like he was excellent at what he did. He knew how to manage me and like really teach me how to be successful, but he didn't have that harder management style the way that Grant did. So I was kind of fortunate.
Yeah, I see a lot of similarities between you and Jared. I think there's some things you guys do that I think that was a really, really fortunate for you to get connected with him. I love both of you guys, and especially, well, I won't say especially because I like both of you equally because it's like you're like my kids, even though I'm like you're my dad all the time. So I was wondering about how you dealt with that. So you really didn't, you were just around him when he was talking and he wasn't necessarily pointing at you.
I was in the morning meeting with him every single day. And, so I was with him, I was around him, but he was never really like directly talking to me. I mean, I don't even think he was really helping me out he wasn't even really talking to me about, sales or anything until like closer to my second year, you know, maybe towards the end. And almost like I had to gain that respect a little bit because he was up there, you know. I mean, he was, and he was running businesses, you know, like successful businesses already. And so, you know, rightfully so. You know, he talks about this all the time. He's like, hey, I don't really pay attention to people until they start producing. Like, he probably like, you know, he doesn't over exaggerate that at all. He probably like underplays the real reality of it, because like I remember walking in the hallway and it'd just be me coming one way, him coming the other way, and he wouldn't even look me in the eyes, and I'm just like, you know, and he wouldn't even look at me. He just walked by. So, you know, that was frustrating, you know, because like I wanted him to really see me and respect me, but not respect me, but I just wanted to like see me and acknowledge me. And so that was probably another thing that actually helped me out, you know, because I did want that, you know, acknowledgement from him that like, you know, hey man, you're here doing something difficult every single day. And I think he did respect it, but you know, it wasn't until later where like he really, you know, me and him started to connect a little bit more.
So at what point in this 8 years did you feel that what you just said occurred, where you started to connect with him and he started to talk to you directly and give you some form of acknowledgement?
Yeah, you know, I think it was probably there was been a couple encounters after that where like he acknowledged me, you know, and he's like, yeah, he'd say, hey, Sprague, you know, and I think I was gaining on him. And I think there was this one time, like I'll never forget this time. And I remember, you know, he would still kind of pop in and out. Like I would see him every day, he would see me, but we weren't talking to each other. You know, this is probably one of the first like direct lessons I got from him. But I was coming down the elevator one day, and I was doing pretty good. I'd saved up a bunch of money at this time. I was like 3 years into to working there, and I'm walking out. Here he comes walking in, and he like slaps me on the chest, backhand, right on the chest. And at this point, by the way, so this is probably like over 3 years in. And I had made some money in my second year. I made over 6 figures, like just barely over. I tripled that the next year. So like I was still living very low. I was actually storing a lot of my money at that time. And I had saved up $100,000. Like I literally had saved it all. And I remember I just that week before, I got $100,000 saved in my bank account at that time. So I don't know if you've ever like seen that, looked at it for the first time, like your eyes pop open and like, it's a lot to you at that time, because you think back, you're like, dang, dude, it took a lot to get there, you know? And, but I felt like I had some swag. So I'm feeling it that week. And here I come, Grant smacks me on the chest. And I don't know why, but he goes, how much money do you have in your bank account? And so at this point, I mean, I literally, in my mind, I thought, I was like, oh my God, this is the perfect time. Like I'm going to be able to tell him, dude, I got 100. So, I mean, I like probably bulk up a little bit where I'm just like getting ready to like unleash on him. And I go, I got 100,000. I was like, I think I got over $100,000 in my bank account, was what I said to him. And he just looks at me and he goes, dude, you're broke. Why are you taking a lunch right now? He's like, you should be on the phones. And then he just walks off. But he was like looking at me like directly in the eyes. And I remember, and then from there on, like, I think we kind of had this like funnier relationship. And, you know, he's always, you know, he pops in all the time, says what's up. You know, I've been to a lot of family dinners and, you know, different things like that. And so, you know, we've connected since then, but I think that was probably one of the first points where like, he kind of took that initiative to be like, you know, dude, I'm going to give you a lesson directly. And, you know, I'll never forget that, you know, because that was a good lesson to learn, actually.
So taking it down a notch, tell me about your darkest day or your worst day after you started working at Cardone, where you were ready to give it up.
You know, I remember working there after about 7 or 8 months was about the timeline.
Okay.
And this is when there was like 2 or 3 other sales guys at that time. And so I was like brand new, but I was like, I was that guy who was teaching them, hey, this is how you do it. You know, just because I had been doing it for 7 months, that I'm like, oh, this is how you get the lead list. This is how you make your calls. This is what you want to say to them. I was like barely having any success, by the way, but I, you know, like anybody with a little bit of tenure, you know, feel like they've done it. And so I'm teaching these guys, and I had a few deals, by the way. But I remember this one kid that worked there ended up closing a pretty significant amount of deals. Like probably he closed more deals in 1 month than I think I closed all like the 7 months before that.
Okay.
And I was also having a bad month. Like I wasn't doing that great. And I remember being like so frustrated. I ended up talking to, this is something I left out of my story earlier, but it's probably a really important part of the story actually. I ended up getting a hold of another guy that I knew, and here I am kind of talking shit about this job, you know, they don't do this and that, and I'm kind of going against them. Same thing I was doing in my other jobs, by the way. And so I kind of turned on him a little bit, and he says, hey man, I can actually help you get another job. I got a guy, I think it was up in Orlando. So I'm in Miami. He's like, you know, it's up in Orlando. I can get you a job. And so I'm having like a bad day. I turned on the company, on the deal. I'm like, this is terrible. This is stupid. This is dumb. Everybody was right. I shouldn't be here right now. I live in a furniture store. I had to give up my car. And I remember, and just so you know, by the way, too, when I rode the bus, I had to walk 8 blocks in the morning, but at night, their drop off wasn't the same. At night, I had to walk down 6 blocks, then up another 8 blocks. So it was even worse. So imagine after a bad day, I'm coming home, I'm walking. I mean, so I thought that day, I'm like, dude, they give me this job, I'm freaking out of here. And sure enough, man, they texted me the next day and they said I could come up and work for them. And so that day before was probably the worst day. This day though, kind of bleeding into the next day, I actually said, okay, I'm going to come work for you guys. And so I was taking the job. The problem that I had, so check this out. The problem that I had was that I was actually too broke to move.
I knew where you were going. You were either going to tell me I had no way to get there, or
yeah,
I can't move. I'm
stuck.
No,
so I was actually too broke to move. Like I could not, like, out of all, I'd already borrowed tons of money from my grandma. You know, my parents kind of gave up on me on giving me money. You know, they thought I was moving back anyway, so they didn't really know what was going on in the day to day. You know, I didn't really have a whole lot at that time. So fortunately, and I'm very thankful that I didn't have money at that time, because I wasn't.
So being broke saved your job.
Dude, being broke saved my job. Like I was fortunate that happened, because it forced me to, you know, quit being a little bitch and actually like level up, you know, like, dude, like what I was saying before, the same problem that I had right there, that I had at every other single job before. And, you know, it's with everything, every bad relationship I had, every bad friendship I ever had. It came down to me. It was me.
Always does.
It always does, man. It always does. And at that point, like, I really, like, it forced me to actually say, I was actually trying to get more commission sales so I could go get that job. But when I ended up winning, like, man, something changes. Like, this is why success is so important, because when, you know, I obviously was not thinking correctly. I'm out of ethics. I'm probably not doing all the right things. I'm negative. I'm hating everything I'm doing. I'm just not doing the right things. But man, you turn that over and like you get on the other side of it and you start having some success and you have some wins, and like all of a sudden, you know, I'm like reminded of why I came down here, and like, you know, why this is so right for me, and like why I wanted to do well here. And I'm like, dude, this job's awesome. And I'm like, you know, you get a deal and like everything changes, and then you get somebody who sends you a success story. They're like, hey man, thanks a lot for hanging in there on all those calls, man. That you know, our company actually really is enjoying it. And all of a sudden you're like, oh dude, like this makes some sense. And it's funny how you can just like kind of flip that coin, and like on the other side of it, like, dude, maybe your position where you're at right now, maybe on the other side of it, it's actually perfect. And you're just not doing all the right things that you could be doing to see it that way.
I have a very similar situation in my life. I've been married 4 times,
Hmm.
and my relationship with my current wife is different than the relationship that I had to the first 3. And the reason it's different is because I realized the common denominator of those 3 divorces was me.
Yeah,
It was me.
every time.
I had to change me. I had to change what I was doing or what I was dramatizing or the way that I thought about certain things. And I have pulled into my life one of the most amazing people. Julie.
Hmm. She is very amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's a driver. And and I remember the first day that I hired her. I said, when you come to work for me, all you're going to do is you're going to get up in the morning and you're going to give me my battle plan. You're going to come. Let's say it's at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, and then
Mm-hmm.
at 11 o'clock, you're going to come follow up on me and make sure I'm making my calls. And any calls I haven't made, you're going to put them down and tell me to follow them and come back at 1 o'clock. So her job was to follow up on, and she still does it to this day. And she drives
That's
me
awesome.
crazy, but that's her job,
Yeah,
and,
that's awesome.
so I can't get mad at her for following up on me because
Yeah.
when I first hired her, that was her job and she's never stopped doing it. And I love her for it. But
Yeah.
the
No,
thing,
she's,
it's just, I had to change my viewpoint on
yeah.
how I felt about those kinds of relationships.
Hmm. Yeah, no, she's amazing. Obviously she does a great job there. And, just on that point, having somebody to follow up and like enforce discipline too has been huge for me. When people see me now, like, oh, how much money do you make? And like, oh yeah, like, oh wow, if I had that position, I could do it. Dude, I get so much discipline put in on me like every single day. That it forces me to do well. It's like having a personal trainer. People pay money for a personal trainer to sit in there and like make you do extra reps. And why don't they do that at their job? So you figured it out, obviously, and you figured out, hey, you know what? Like that's a successful action. I'm going to put somebody in place for that. So that's cool.
So we're coming really close to the hour-long message. So I don't want to. I know it's past your bedtime, right?
It's getting there. It's getting there, man. I got to be up early, So, but yeah, I mean, if you have any other,
what time do you get up in the morning?
I wake up at 5:45.
I
So
get up every morning at 4:10, young man.
Okay, I like that.
And it's your fault because I get up at 4:10 and I go out and I walk for, you say, 2 miles. And while I'm doing that walk, I'm shooting all these videos, which you see some of them. And, it's just, and I'm not complaining, I'm bragging.
Yeah.
And I try to be in my office before 7 every morning. And I remember back in the old mentoring calls, probably the first round of mentor calls that Grant had, he got into this beat the sun up thing, and shit, that's early. But so,
Yeah.
and it was real easy for me. All I decided was I need to go to bed at 7:30 every night. That's my target. I never make it till around 8:30, but I'm a little bit older than you, and my body's a little bit more run down than yours is, but I'm in a routine. I've got a discipline, and
yeah,
I haven't figured out how to cut my my relationship with Comcast or Xfinity, but I don't watch much TV anymore.
Yeah,
I don't have any time for it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think the routine's real important. I think a lot of people bypass that for comfort. And so I don't really think it matters how early you wake up. It's like, hey, what is the routine? So like, are you getting 7-8 hours of sleep at night? So I think that's the most important thing. And then getting up early is just successful because look, you're probably not going to have any meetings. People don't really do a lot of business before like 8 or 9 a.m. And so it allows you to get things done. And just closing out cycles of action every morning, so you wake up, for me, I wake up, I do training every morning. I run every single morning. I run like minimum 2 miles. On my off days, it's 2 miles. Usually it's like 3 or 4 miles. I'll run that every single day, and so like I wake up, I do training, I write my goals down, I run a couple miles, I put my suit on. Like, dude, I've done so much moving into my days.
But you're not wearing a suit and walking to work anymore, right?
I'm not. Yes, and I can drive to work now. So I got a nice car to drive, and that's awesome. So but like you get a lot done, and like you get to carry that momentum into the day. So I think a lot of people, like when you rush, when you skip, when you don't wake up, and you're like trying to be. This is my old habits, by the way. Wake up late, not work out in the mornings, run to work, you know, not put my tie on until I got to work, you know, like all types of stuff, you know, bad habits, you know.
Have you seen the video where that admiral talked about the SEAL
Making the
training and
bed.
making the bed?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was a high school baseball coach, for my listeners who don't know that. And I went to a new school and I suddenly figured out, now all of my players I was a varsity coach, my players were 16, 17, and 18 years old. And I had got this inclination that they weren't taking care of anything. So I told them that every morning they had to get up and they had to text me a picture of their bed mate.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of pushback from the kids. But about 3
Oh,
days
yeah.
into the program, I get a call from one of the kids' moms, and she told me, I want you to know that you've ruined my day. I said, what did I do? She says, I don't normally take care of my son's room to the afternoons. And now because you're making him take these pictures, I've got to go in and clean up his room in the morning. I want to say, did you
Wow.
listen to what you just said?
Yeah, crazy.
Your child has no chance to survive in this world if you're making his bed.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. I got a good lesson from Grant, actually. Let's see, it was probably, 5 or 6 years ago. And, you know, we're in the room and we're making phone calls and, you know, we're going at our day and he pops in there and he's just yelling, you know, he's like, who left the damn fork with the peanut butter in the sink, you know? And like, and I'm sitting here, we're like making all these calls. We're trying to sell like $30,000 training programs and turn around. And I'm like, why is this guy talking about the fork in the sink? You know, obviously I don't say that, but I'm like, you know, and he's just I can see he's lit up on this thing too. I mean, he's so mad about it. He's like, this shit just pisses me off. And then but then he starts to get into it. He's like, if you guys can't close that cycle, how are you going to close the deal? and I started to think about it. He's like, you guys need to be closing all your cycles. He's like, you guys need to clean up your cars, clean up your desk. He's like, get that shit off your desk right there. I mean, this guy was lit up on it. And I didn't know why, but at that time. And then I'm like, man, you know, and I really started to think about it. I'm like, dude, why is the guy, you know, I started these are little things I picked up about Grant along the way. I've had these little thoughts many times, but they're big, like realizations where I was like, why is this guy who's worth millions and millions and millions of dollars worried about the freaking fork in the kitchen?
With the peanut butter on it.
With the peanut butter on it. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, you know, who cares? You know, and then I always start to ask, I'm like, dude, why am I not worried about it? You know, why is he worried about it? And I'm not worried about it. You know, like, what does he know that I don't know? So, you know, it's funny because now, you know, we've got these, you know, with our salespeople, like I'm so brutal, you know, I'm like, pick stuff up, you know, I'm like, close your cycles, you know, and I give them the same lesson, you know, I'm like, dude, you guys got this stuff all over your desk. Dude, if you can't if you can't complete that cycle of action, how are you going to close the deal? How are you going to follow up customers? You guys got all this junk everywhere. You know, I had one guy recently, dude, I actually had to tell the guy to clean his car out, you know? And I'm like, dude, it's like, you're costing me money having that dirty of a car by not cleaning. So when the story about the admiral that came out about make your bed, like, man, like we've been pushing hard on actually doing that for many years. So like, I love that video. I'm in high agreement with it too.
Cool. So from me to you, the audience, if you want any training, you want a friend inside the Cardone family, call Steve Spray. Steve, give them your number so they can call you.
Yeah, if you guys want to reach out to me, my cell phone is 317-753-5608. You guys can reach out to me. You guys can email me, Steve, STEVE, @grantcardone.com. You know, if you guys like what you heard today, you guys thought that, you know, hey, look, I've been in a situation like that, but maybe I didn't get out. Look at Grant Cardone. Go to grantcardone.com. We've got some unbelievable programs, and I personally would love to help you out. And
you are now also pretty high up in the Cardone automotive part of it too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'm doing both of those actually. So I do Cardone automotive sales, and I do on the other side. Yeah. So we've this year's been a little bit different where, you know, I spent some time doing only automotive, but you know, we're doing both now. So I got so many clients, you know, Tom, you're one of my clients. I got clients in the furniture space and, you know, roofing and tax sales and insurance sales. So, you know, it just works out better for me to stay wide like that.
Perfect. Well, I want to tell you that from my heart to you, I appreciate you so much. I know I don't give you enough acknowledgement, but when the
Thank you.
next time I get a chance, I'm going to smack you with the back of my hand on your chest so you feel like you're totally acknowledged. Now I know what you really need to be acknowledged. And I appreciate your time. I appreciate you, all you do for the planet. I appreciate all you do for my company. And you can rest assured I'm going to ask for something else real soon.
Yeah, you always can, Tom. I'm always happy to help out, man. Thank you so much. Appreciate you, sir. And, looking forward to seeing you soon.
All right. So that will be the end of today's podcast. Again, if you need some personal assistance, you want to get smarter, you want to get younger, you want to learn how to make more money, you want to figure out how to scale up your business, you want all of that kind of stuff, this is your guy. I totally recommend him with all my heart. So that's the end of today's podcast. I hope you have as much fun as I did. It's fun talking to my personal friends, especially young guys like Steve that I learn something from every time I talk to him because I'm a student.